guys, Freaky Finance here. Today we're going to do a fun one, CRISPR Therapeutics. Every now and then I get to do a video that I feel very passionate about, and this gene editing one is one that I always wanted to do for a while. I wanted to do it a few years ago. Actually, the last time I talked about CRISPR on the channel and gene editing was with Vertex, so we decided to go up quality to Vertex due to some reasons, and biotech's always higher risk because a lot of the companies don't make money yet. And so they really rely on source of financing and access to capital. And as interest rates rose to fight inflation, the access to capital for a lot of basically businesses that don't have any revenue yet, because they're all in R&D, got destroyed. The valuations are abysmal. XBI hasn't moved anywhere. The index for biotech hasn't moved anywhere for 10 years. So it's been a very tough space. The last 3 years haven't been kind to it. And this was also exacerbated by some R&D changes that we're going to talk about. And it's one of the things. It also links back to one of the reasons why we're overweight Amazon and Google, is because of these tax changes help them in terms of CapEx and R&D spend. And the same thing is going to be true for domestic R&D spend for these type of companies. Now, this one's different because usually you need to make money to pay tax, right? And all these companies still produce losses. However, there's an inkling here, and this is something I want to bring up, is even Gemini and a couple of AIs I pay for too, they fail to understand sometimes second derivative things. So like they'll focus on the fact that even though the effective tax rate will go down for them, the AI argues that there's not a real impact, and that's kind of true. And it does mention that there's a tax shield, but it doesn't link into like that could be a great asset for other companies in the space that are profitable, because they can basically makes these guys more profitable if they want to buy them out. And so I would expect, assuming the big tax bill passes with provisions for R&D anyway, which I think is going to be likely because they passed it same month in 2017, that it could be very lucrative for some of these businesses in terms of partnerships, and not just partnerships with programs, but actually buying them out because of how distressed they are relative to the other companies. And really it's a tale of two cities. So when we did Vertex, we kind of pivoted out of CRISPR into Vertex, basically going up quality. It was right around here. And it turned out to be prudent because, like I said, biotech and CRISPR, like you can go through the list, whether you want to do base editing, Beam and Prime and Verb, they've all been destroyed, right? Intellia destroyed. So it has been very bad over the last 3 years for CRISPR investors, even though the reports haven't been bad at all, like the trials. And trials take time. And like I said, investors are very myopic. And so anything that takes time, it's getting discounted like crazy down. Anything that's currently happening is being exaggerated. And so that's the flip side. So we're going to do the video today because it's kind of at an interesting point, at least CRISPR Therapeutics is. I started a position during the pullback in April. Kind of, again, the same thinking was the tax bill should help these guys out in terms of the R&D deductibility. So anyway, we started a position in CRISPR. It's done well lately. We started a position in Intellia, which has also done okay lately. So I'm kind of eyeballing about this. You never, at least from my perspective, I never allocate too much capital to these things because they can really be binary. Like this could be a risk of permanent loss, whereas I'm likely to see that with Brookfield or Amazon, right? Google, it's less likely. Whereas these ones, it can be part of the game. Some of these do go to zero over time, especially if the science isn't good. You have a couple bad clinical trials, your access to capital dries up, right? You just get diluted away. So even if you're right, you don't make money. And that's very common in this space. It reminds me kind of like gold exploration miners. So what the tax bill basically proposals aim to revert to the immediate full expensing of domestic R&D. Right now they have to capitalize it over 5 years. So even though they spend the money up front, they can't record it for tax purposes. They have to do it over 5 years. Whereas now they'll be able to deduct the whole thing up front. There's notes to myself. CRISPR is unprofitable, so the effective tax rate doesn't go down like what we saw for Google and Amazon. Actually made ChatGPT or Gemini. Basically, the effective tax rate for Google was like 16.8%, and it calculated that it would be around 9 to 10%, which is pretty interesting. But in this case, it doesn't work like that, but it does have this tax shield, which the AI recognized, but it doesn't recognize what that could mean for an acquirer, or at least it doesn't take that next step. And this, if you want to freeze frame, we're going to go through a lot of information, so this is going to be really quick. So if you ever want to pause something in the video, just feel free, because there's a lot of content here, and a lot of this, again, is for me to echo my own thoughts as we go through this, and whether we're right or wrong. So I can pull up CRISPR 3 years from now and be like, what were you thinking? Why did you put this much in? Why didn't you put more in? Whatever happened. It'll just be interesting to see, right? And this is true in my mind. Biotech is naturally a momentum play, so when things start picking up, it's going to really start picking up. You have a good clinical trial, your access to capital improves at the same time. So you get both at once. And that's one of the reasons why you have these big binary swings. And the same is true if it goes bad, then your access to capital dries up and you get smacked on the way down even harder. So I wanted to bring that up because it kind of lays the macro overlay. What is CRISPR? I mean, there's a lot of channels that are doctors that deal with this. So we're not going to go into like too much of the science because there's better sources for that. It's not really my strength, though I do read a lot. So anyway, CRISPR, basically this one is just, you're basically taking scissors and cutting. You're making DNA breaks, double-stranded DNA breaks, which is different than ones that came after them, like Prime and Beam, which do base editing. And it's a pretty big breakthrough. Like, there's a couple great books on it. But anyway, what CRISPR does, it basically allows you to guide RNA, a molecule that reads the DNA to match the problematic gene. The guide is attached to the Cas9 scissors. When the combination is induced to a cell, the guide RNA hones in to the target DNA sequence, and once it finds the exact spot, it cuts it. So there's other things. There's a lot of pros and cons of different types of things. CRISPR is the first one, and it's the closest to seeing revenue. We're starting to see revenue finally with their partnership with Vertex. It's Casgevy, and the CRISPR also has a stronger balance sheet out of the rest of them, so their access to capital isn't as crazy if I'm too early still, even though I've been waiting for probably 5 years to start getting into this space. This is the AI just basically saying the proposed tax stations are a favorable shift for US biotech. I mean, US biotech has been abysmal, right? You can see 2021 going from 150 to 83 for the entire index for every single company is now worth half of what it used to be. And you can see just over the last 10 years, it hasn't even kept up with inflation. So biotech's been a place where you want to underperform, or people have underperformed. And so it's always been riskier. We will see if the extra tax bill helps this access to capital with XBI, as well as interest rates if they're finally starting to peak out, right? Which they have in other countries. Just America has been stronger, so they've been keeping their rates higher. So in terms of the pipeline, CRISPR has a lot. We're going to focus on all 5 of them. I'm going to go really quickly through them. So apologize if there's a lot of information here. So Hemi, so sickle cell disease, beta thalassemia. We're going to talk about those 2 things. That's the one that's just starting to get revenue with Vertex right now. So it's already approved. It's actually being administered now. It's about $2 million a shot. I mean, but it's a cure. So unlike having, one of the cool things with gene editing is so you don't have to take a drug for the rest of your life. It's really done, right? Or at least that's the idea. So you're likely the individual to pay up more up front because it's a cure and they can pay it over time, kind of thing. And there's a reason why the price tag is higher. It's not just because it costs a lot of money to do the R&D. It's very linear thinking. There's also, we're going to go into this ex vivo and in vivo and what's involved. And sometimes certain projects, especially when they're not to scale, are more expensive. And then you have partnerships, like in different countries, different things are covered and not covered. So you have a reimbursement scheme here. And we're not going to get into all that because it's way too complicated. We're just going to talk about the pipeline and some fun things that AI found for each of them. So we're going to go into all of these CAR T, so oncology, ex vivo again. There's your in vivo for cardiovascular, which could be very big, but it's still early on. You can see a lot in the clinical. So you still got those phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3s, right? Which take a lot of time, or they have traditionally taken a lot of time. And a lot of these companies are starved for liquidity. CRISPR isn't one. Luckily, they raised enough money. But we've seen this kind of like these, even if you're right, like you could be right, this thing could cure something, and you might not even make money, right? Because you got diluted away during that period. And a lot of people can't understand that. And so you need to be very select in this space of where you want to be when you want to be it. And it's definitely a place where you get either you can make a lot of money or you can lose a lot of money. So I just want to be that clear because it is very important. So anyway, oncology, in vivo, cardiovascular, rare disease, you have diabetes, then you have other like muscle ones, which we're going to talk about. These, we're going to talk about delivery. That's kind of like the hardest point that they're trying to answer right now as of June 14th, 2025. Delivery and getting the drug to where it needs to go is the hardest thing. And what a lot of the companies have done initially is basically these companies have targeted places where it's easy to get the drug to where it needs to go. Now, ex vivo is different. because you're basically taking the cells out of the human's body and doing the treatment outside and then putting the cells back in. And now this can be effective because you have so much control. You can literally decide, I'm going to affect these cells. You can do it, but it's costly and it takes time. And there's other things as well. You have to suppress the immune response. So there's trade-offs here is what I'm trying to say. In vivo is less proven so far. And in vivo means you're actually delivering the drug inside the body in real time. Just think of like an IV. And this has been, I mean, there's some phase 1s that are pretty strong already. We're going to start seeing the phase 2s and 3s with the sample size increasing and trying to get the dosages right. And that'll be more interesting. There's a higher risk, right? Because you don't have that same kind of control. But if it's successful, I mean, that's a lot more access to a lot more people because you don't have to take the cells out of the body, do something with it, put it back in the body. You can really just administer it. It's a lot more easy as a procedure for any type of hospital or medical facility. And there's a lot more scale embedded in that model as well. So we're going to talk about that. They're using LNPs, so liquid nanoparticles. So these lipid nanoparticles, one of the reasons why they're doing these targeted liver ones, especially for blood, is because a lot of things go through the liver naturally because it's the body's filter system. So they know it will actually go to where it wants to go when they do in vivo, or that's the idea behind it. And so that was also methodical. Obviously, there's other things there that could, like higher liver enzymes targeting the liver, could be a thing to start looking at as well. And the FDA is usually overreacted to these type of events, right? Because even if someone were to abuse Tylenol, you would have elevated liver enzymes. I think there was a study where it said Tylenol wouldn't be approved today if the FDA was as hard as they were on current drugs trying to enter the market, especially things that could cure crazy diseases. Anyway, so we're going to jump into it. It's always nice to do a video that could try to improve the access to capital for some of these guys. I always like when people are like, I'm going to donate some money. I'm like, you should really just allocate capital to these places, like to wealthy people, like to try to change the world for better, right? That's like one of the few places in investing where you can try to make an impact in a very positive way for humanity. So anyway, hemoglobin. So we're going to talk about Casgevy. It's the one that's currently on market. It's already approved, so it's been de-risked from that point of view. Now it's just ramping up, getting people to sign on for that $2 million. And basically, Vertex is a salesman, and CRISPR is getting basically a royalty from the partnership. So they want to get as much uptake as they can and keep seeing success, right? So this is literally a cure for sickle cell disease. Cure. All right. The second one is the CD117. So it's actually targeting the same thing, so sickle cell. Maybe, yeah, I might as well show. It's going to be a long video anyway. So how I organize it is the Hemis, the CAR-Ts, the in vivo cardiovascs, diabetes, right? So just like their pipeline, kind of just talked about ex vivo, more expensive, but are not proven. I call it forced access because I'm very simple. The odds of success, I believe, are higher because you're forcing delivery of the cells you want, but the cost is higher to the end user. In vivo will save money. Challenge is access. Some diseases like DMD and CF, which we haven't talked about yet. These are the other disclosed partners. Muscular dystrophy and cystic fibrosis are target, but they're harder to target because they need to hit muscle tissues and lung for CF. So that's the challenge, is will they still be effective in vivo as they have been ex vivo? And that's what we're still trying. That's probably the most hardest probability, and not necessarily for these ones. Maybe they're higher because they targeted these ones for a specific reason. But in general, the access to other cures down the road, it won't necessarily just be to find what gene we need to change or fix or edit. It will be how do we actually get to the body to change it in a meaningful way. It's efficacious for the end user, right? So it's not just affecting 5% of the cells. It needs to actually cure it by every cell, or almost every cell. So it's not expressed as often. Now there is some off the shelf and on the shelf. So autogenesis from your own body, low risk of rejection. But again, if it goes to your own body, it's going to cost more money because it's not scalable. No one has everyone's cells on all the SKUs for 6 billion people, 7 billion people somewhere, right? This is always low risk of rejection but high cost. And then allogenic from a donor can be off the shelf, so very scalable, but there's a potential for your body to reject it. So that's something to also keep in mind because we're going to flip through a lot of slides and they use a lot of vernaculars and jargon. It kind of helps bring it home to what they are. This video is already going to be longer than I want, but anyway, sickle cell, intense pain crises, episodes of excruciating pain, Since the red blood cells are sickled, they carry oxygen. If they're sickled, they can't carry oxygen as well. Leads to weakness and exhaustion. Because they're sickled, they also can clog up things. So that's where the pain actually comes from. You can have damage to the spleen as well as strokes, depending on where the blockage occurs. So very bad, right? Transfusion-dependent beta thalassemia, right? You need blood transfusions every 2 to 5 weeks. Talk about your standard of living, right? That's just crazy to just keep trying to live, right? These are huge potential cures for a lot of people. And this one, the first one, Casgevy, is already being done in people right now as a cure. So it's very special. This is how I understand things. So Casgevy is the one that's currently being administered with Vertex. We're about to finally see some revenue, which will be nice. It will help offset some of the R&D at CRISPR. CD111 is basically trying to do the same thing Casgevy did, but with in vivo and without heavy chemo. So basically, they're circumventing the need for this harsh chemo that's associated with the ex vivo treatment. Here you can see prior to receiving the modified cells, the patient undergoes full chemo conditioning, basically designed to eliminate their existing bone marrow from cells, thereby creating space. So basically out with the old, in with the new, and that's required in the current process. One of the reasons why some people might not be able to do it is because it has this high dose of chemo, right? And aside from just the price tag as well, because it's expensive to build the cells out, put back in. All right, so I just wanted to point that out. I did do something fun so that I was like, just have fun with it. What are the potential odds of success of the drug, right? So I did think it was funny that it's put 99%, even though it's approved. It tells me that it's at least thinking like anything can happen, even if it's likely. And then 85% standard of care for eligible patients given intensity. These are their word choice, AI's word choice, not mine. And then probable value is you just like sum product together. So 99, 85. If it was a standard of care, what would it be worth? A lot of money, right? Especially relative to the current valuation. And we'll do a summary at the end to just, if these things are successful, the market obviously thinks it's not going to be successful in half of these. If not, honestly, probably 80% of these are not going to be successful. It's probably not even pricing in this, right? Which is already successful. That's how in despair biotech is right now. Gene editing in particular. The access to capital is just gone. No one wants to try to make the world a better place. So here you can see CD117. So again, probably stress lower. It is in vivo, so you're gonna have to see if they're able to do it or not. But it would help the cost. It would drive down the cost a lot, and it would get more people who couldn't handle chemo still have a cure. Super important. I just like to compare. Like for this one, I want to see standard of care for Casgevy just to see, right? And when you're competing against the standard of care is 2 to 5 weeks of blood transfusion for beta thalassemia, you're just like, oh man, right? Like this is their best they have, and they're still experiencing these chronic symptoms, right? That's the standard of care. Like obviously this is way better if you don't have to deal with any of that ever again for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about side effects of drugs. You don't have to worry about drugs cascading with other drug effects, right? It's just boom, done. So these things are, in my mind, as cures are mispriced in the market, I think. And I've heard reasons why. They don't think it's not a good business because you cure them, so you can't just keep making money from them. But I think that's very dark. Things like that. Anyway, B cell. So we're gonna go to CAR T now. CAR T is also super exciting. Here, let's go to here. You can see we're expecting. One of the reasons why we're doing this is important to the video. One of the reasons why we're doing CRISPR today is because they have a lot of readouts in 2025, right? Mid-2025, CTX112, update in 2025 for CTX131, in phase 1 and 2 trials. So kind of like, again, to make it more human. So what exactly is a B cell? Nothing to see, cells in lymphoma or leukemia. You're going to have fatigue, pain, weakened immune system, organ dysfunction, cancer, whatever the current cancer drug treatment. So usually going to be with chemo anyway. And then SLE. These are important because these are the other indications, right? So CTX112 is targeting this one as well. The lupus, which really hits everything. Pretty important deal. You can see the market share if it was a blockbuster, if it was successful. It's quite big, right? I thought it was interesting how high these were because these are oncology, which is usually, in my mind, almost always less likely to succeed. Especially hard tumors. This was AI's comment again, which I thought was fun. Solid tumors are tough, which is very true. You can kind of see how it's lower probability. So what is CAR T? It's a chimeric antigen receptor. Basically, gets cells from the patient or from the donor. Then you engineer the cells to express these CARs. And this makes the cells known to the T cell's body, activating the T cells to recognize and eliminate the cancer cells. Then they make a bunch more cells and put it back in the patient. All right. So CAR T is innately ex vivo. So that means it's always going to be costly. The procedure involves, right? Gilead's Yescarta is pretty good. And CAR T. Gene editing therapy, so it's slightly different. The engine is a match off-the-shelf product available for treating eligible patients. So it's supposed to be able to scale more because of the allogeneic nature. And we'll have to see if they could do it, because that's that's a lot about lupus, leukemia, right? Just some pretty big issues. All right, so CTX131, the next one, targets CD70. So this is renal cell carcinoma, RCC, and this is the one that's the hard tumor one. They do have some pretty strong results in phase 1 for CTX130, which is a prior version of CTX131. Didn't have some extra edits, and they did see disease control in 81.3% of patients. One patient received a durable, complete response lasting 3 years. So we'll have to see if this new editing that they did, and they improved it basically from that. So they're expecting hopefully the results to be better. So that'll be exciting to see. These are 2025 events, right? So I want to do the video ahead of time just to see. And you can see the market. We're not going to talk just for time about anti-G, but there's another one there as well. Cardiovascular, this is the in vivo one. GFH, basically you get high LDL, bad, heart attack, strokes in 20s and 30s, so very young, or childhood. In the case of HoFH, current patients require intensive treatments like frequent dialysis to remove LDL cholesterol from the body, multiple lipid-lowering medications, right? And you're still at the risk of having a heart attack in your 20s and 30s. This one's targeting LIPA, so lipoprotein A has also more recently been a genetic factor that leads to increased probability of heart attack, so they want to target that. Also very big, obviously, when you're talking cardiovascular health. So it's one of the bigger causes, like heart attacks, heart disease. I want to point out here, it's likely the market's going to treat these similar. So if one fails or has higher liver enzyme, it's going to focus that the rest may as well and increase that probability, or vice versa. If there is none, they'll start probably all moving together. So these things are going to be probably more interconnected to the market more than they should. That's just the way of the beast, because they're all targeting liver cells with LNPs. So I want to point that out as well. So that's a big risk reward there. If these ones start coming in even more favorably with no grade 4 liver risk, stuff like that, you're probably going to start seeing a favorable market reaction. And then vice versa, if you see a less safe profile or arguably less safe profile, you'll see pressure on the stock, leading to a better opportunity, especially for some of these, because none of these are priced in of success in my mind. We're going to go a little bit quicker here. So diabetes, because it's already long. This is ex vivo cell engineering. So this one's interesting. One is with a device, one without the device. That's what these two basically are. This one's for deviceless. So basically they're going to make, so Vertex kind of like, you take this one, which I have interesting reservations on, my own opinion. That probably assess, again, not great, not horrible. I mean, it is type 1 diabetes. If they could help with that, that'd be a huge market. But anyway, deviceless. So what they're basically doing is making the cells hypoimmune. What that really means is making them like ghosts or ninjas in the immune system. So what they're doing, so diabetes is basically an autoimmune disease. So the immune system, which is designed to identify and destroy foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses, mistakenly targets and eliminates insulin producing beta cells in the pancreas. So what they're trying to do is edit these cells so the autoimmune system can't find them. So make them like little ninjas so they can still produce. This is a high risk, high reward. It'll be very interesting to see how it works. Devices have been interesting because if you have a whole device, it's also a foreign product, and sometimes the body will also fight that. But anyway, this would be very exciting if they could get the deviceless approach. The other indications, the AI knows, which I thought was interesting, the probability of success very low, or relatively low, but it does also understood that if it's successful, these are all game changers. So these are kind of like your moonshots inside the portfolio. But the hardest thing isn't that these gene edits don't work, it's just how do we get the gene edit to where the individual needs it in their body. right? So ones that naturally go through the liver, because a lot of things naturally flow through the liver as the liver filters out all the toxins. For muscles, that's not true, right? And specific organs can be harder, right? So you can see the reason why they're focusing on liver and blood. There's a reason behind it, is because the access isn't there. So they are trying to do this. It'll be very interesting to see if they can, right? Because this would be material improvements for all these people's lives based on the current standard of care. And I use care usually. The cash burn, I mean, AI thinks CRISPR is a cash burn by 24 months. It's better than most. So if things are tighter for longer, it's still probably going to outperform the other biotechs. So too early. The potential outcome. So if we were to sum up all the probabilities of the AI things, these are all AI numbers. You can see $70 billion probable value. Now that doesn't, I mean, that would be split between whatever the partner is, right? And then you have the net present value of that at a pretty high cost of capital. So to get a real value, but it just helps visualize, like I don't even need to discount it to know that I'm getting a deal here, right? Like the company's worth 3.5 billion, but they have 1.8 billion in cash, net cash. So, I mean, your EV is at 1.7 billion, and you already have a cure for sickle cell, right? That you're just finally starting to get money on, with decent releases coming out in 25 for oncology, right? At a time when we know the XBI has been left for dead, and we know that there's a favorable macro event with the tax bill, as well as interest rates likely no longer, at least putting more and more pressure and strangling out the industry even harder. So anyway, it's definitely an interesting time to look at it, so I really want to do the video. I do think if you ever want to invest in something that is the benefit of humanity, these are the type of ones I would consider. Because you could really change the world for a lot of people, I think. And I think one of the reasons why we haven't broke through as fast as we could is because the access to capital for these companies has been severely impaired. And it will be interesting to see, because China's probably going to take over soon in terms of gene editing, just given, I mean, they don't have the same type of access to capital problems. Like when America works and people get money, like tech companies get money quickly, you can see changes quicker. And so it'll be interesting to see how America responds to that, because we're already likely to see more standard of cares come out of China instead of America at this point. And we'll see how they respond to that, because usually they don't like to be number two, especially in something that they have historically been so strong at, which is the capital markets, right? It's the biggest strength of America in my view. So it's kind of failed biotech anyway, for sure. For small companies in biotech, they've all been strangled out. But yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts. It's definitely an interesting time to look at it. There's a lot of slides I want to go through, but it's just there's just too much information to talk about, and there's a lot in this pipeline. I do want to end, so normally we do financials, but in this case, because it's pre-revenue, all you see is R&D, and that's important to know, right? Like this company is losing money. Almost most of the companies in biotech lose money, and that their next source of capital, whenever their next raise is going to dilute you, right? Or what if they borrow debt, right? Heaven forbid. These costs have to come from somewhere, right? And oftentimes it comes from the investor, and that's something I just want to hammer home, because biotech has been a place where dreams go to die. So I want that point out. Strength of CRISPR is the balance sheet. So you can see here they have about $1.85 billion, which is nice. A lot of other companies don't have that kind of resources, though they are burning quite a bit every quarter, especially to try to get these phase 2s and 3s out, right? So it'll be interesting to see how the market starts treating it when revenue starts coming in. It should be happening now. So yeah, I just figured it would be an interesting time to do the video. I know when I look back in 3 years, I'll be like, imagine this happened or this didn't happen, and how we could learn going forward. But it's just anyway, it's an interesting time. So yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts on the gene editing space in general. If there's certain companies you're really ecstatic about, or it releases in 2025 or 26, feel free to DM me or put it in the comments. And have a great rest of your day.